Okay. And we are back rolling live here at the Schwab Impact Conference with Michael Kitces.
It's good to be here.
It is always great to have you. I was thinking about this. I think this is the third time we've done an on location with you.
Yes, I'm making the rounds this fall. So we were out for CFP Boards Connections Conference.
And what was the? Oh, it was FA NorCal.
FA NorCal earlier this year.
Yes, we'll be back to that as well. I'm sure you'll be there.
Absolutely, fantastic conference,
So
and ironically also here in San Francisco, where
yes,
we
indeed.
are today for
just
Impact.
on the street, actually.
Yes.
So I'm feeling like a bit of a Kitces groupie. You know, I got my VW microbus, and I just go from conference
That's
to conference rolling
fantastic.
around.
It's fantastic. We'll get it wrapped in blue. It'll be great.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you taking some time. I know
My
you're busy.
pleasure. My pleasure.
So earlier today, you did one of the keynotes on the 5 trends impacting financial advice.
Yep.
You want to share some of that for the folks that were not looking up
Yeah,
to be here live
yeah.
at the conference?
So much of the conversation ultimately came down to technology and the way that technology reshapes the advisor business and kind of the ways it reshapes the business that we don't seem to realize or anticipate. The conventional view for the better part of 10 years now is automation, AI is, inevitable fee compression, inevitable consolidation, possibly existential threat. And I look at that, I'm like, well, this is not the first time we've had disruption threat, right? If I go back 50 years ago, we were all stockbrokers calling our clients, and someone made this thing called a computer, and tech suddenly showed up. And I mean, if you go back to the roots, basically, like, the origin of Schwab was a Northern California tech startup that was launched in the late 1970s to disrupt human financial advisors using computers and the rise of technology.
Interesting context. I never thought of it that way.
That was basically the origin story. And like it came after, in 1975, we deregulated stock trading commissions. And so suddenly brokerage firms could use technology to automate and improve the efficiency of brokering, which historically didn't matter because the trading commissions were fixed by the regulators. Like you were legally prohibited from competing on price, so no one innovated on tech. We deregulated the pricing. You could compete on price. Tech companies showed up to compete on price and use technology, drive down the cost of trading. And if you look it up, like that was the origin story for Schwab, Ameritrade, Scottrade, the predecessor to what became E-Trade, were all companies that started in about a 5 to 7 year span, late 70s, early 1980s, to use technology to disrupt what essentially was the human financial advisor, which was stockbrokers at the time.
Yeah.
And frankly, like the tech won. Stock trading commissions crashed, now basically down to zero.
Yeah.
And we all shifted and we went in the mutual fund business. And we sold mutual funds. I would argue better value for consumers. Like a professionally managed mutual fund was better than like boiler room stock of the day in the brokering era.
Yes.
So, great improvement.
Full disclosure, I was a stockbroker 30 years ago, and I actually talked to Josh Brown about this.
Yeah.
300-400 dials a day selling individual stocks.
Yeah. Because you got paid enough on a call if they placed a trade, like the math actually worked okay. It was hard, but it added up.
But it's not work for the old. Let me tell you something. That's a young person's game.
Yes. Yeah. So we went from there into mutual funds, and we had a great run of mutual funds. And then like the internet showed up, and E-Trade said you can trade mutual funds like a baby from the crib, right? That was their commercial at the time. Schwab launched the OneSource program, a no-load platform when, you go back to the 90s, like 99% of us got paid by the commission load on a mutual fund, and a bunch of tech companies launched no-load platforms. And so once again, like technology was supposed to kill financial advisors. Like this is when I started. I began my career in 2000. And a lot of people said, like, why would you become a financial advisor? Like E-Trade's going to put you out of business. Anybody can buy stocks online. Like, what's the point? Like, well, turns out we just shifted the business model and the value proposition. So, anybody can buy a stock online. We make diversified asset allocated portfolios, and we've done that for the better part of 20 years now. And so these technology disruption events aren't new. Like, we got computers, we got the internet, we got smartphones, we got robo, and it turns out advisors are more financially successful now than they were at any point in history, providing more value to clients. But the value propositions change. And so when I look from that frame, like a lot of the expectation of the industry is tech is supposed to disrupt and displace us, and I look at how this actually plays out, I'm like, no, technology ends out reshaping the value proposition because we as advisors use the tech to push what used to be labor-intensive manual processes behind the scenes or fully automate them. then we go and do other things for our clients instead that add more value on top. So 20 years ago, I was at an advisory firm that had $200 million under management and 3 full-time traders and was about to hire the 4th because that's what it took to manually implement clients with spreadsheets. Then rebalancing software came out. We bought iRebal, and 5 or 6 years later, by 2010, we went from $200 million to $1 billion firm, and we went from 3 traders to 1, and the one had so much spare time that we gave him other job duties because he was kind of bored.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we took all the dollar savings by not having to scale to what would have been like 5 or 6 traders by then, and we expanded financial planning, built out a financial planning department, and did a whole bunch of additional things for clients. And so it's not technology displaces us and causes fee compression. That's just not how it's played out for decades of history.
Yeah.
It's we end up using the technology, displacing our own services that we automate with the technology. And then basically, like, you get one of 2 choices. You sit back on your laurels and enjoy your really high margins, or your competitor up the street says, well, I don't really need my margins to be that high. If you're going to run a high margin firm, I'm just going to reinvest the margin back in and do all sorts of cool new things for my clients, and I'll take all your clients.
Yes.
Right. You know, it's the old Jeff Bezos, like, your margin
Yes.
is my opportunity.
I love that.
And so that's, to me, why the other fascinating thing is you look back 25 years ago to, like, the early benchmarking studies that Moss Adams used to do, and the average advisory firm had like 60, 80 clients per advisor and a 30% profit margin. And you look at the benchmarking studies today after the internet and robo and smartphones and remote and all the cool things we do, and the average advisory firm has the exact same 60, 80 clients per advisor, and the margin's actually slightly lower. It's like 25 to 28 now.
Sure.
So we got amazing technology. The median advisory fee is the same 1% it's been. The average client load is the same as that it's been. We're actually slightly less profitable now, but we do so much more.
Sure.
We do so much more, which I argue is great from the consumer end. They're getting a huge lift in the depth of value of our services. From our end, we don't get displaced or knocked out or fee compressed, but it does mean we have to adopt the tech and then use it to actually free up time to reinvest in other services for clients, or our own competitors that use the technology better than we do end up pushing us out.
Yes. So what's going to be the new rebalancer, right? So that rebalancer took the place of 5 or 6 traders. What's going to be the new rebalancing technology that's going to be disruptive like that?
So I do think the next disruptive layer of that is, I hate to say how overused it is, like, it is some aspect of, call it AI, call it process automation. Again, like, I look at this on a relative basis. So the second firm I was at in my career, what would this be, 22 years ago, 3 lead advisors, about 1.3 million of revenue, which back then was a like pretty good sized production firm.
Sure.
And there were, I think, 10 or 11 of us in total, like 3 advisors and 8 support staff to make that happen. We had a wonderful woman. Her name was Betty. Betty's job was to open the mail when it came in every day, grab all the client statements, sort them into individual client folders in our literal room of client folders, make sure there were no checks, because heaven forbid a client mailed you a check, can't sit on that overnight. That's got to get processed right away. Greet the clients when they came in for in-person meetings, because 100% of them did. And this was literally a full-time job.
Right.
To handle all this. And like, Betty's job doesn't exist today. Like,
That's right.
the statements are electronic, the transfers are electronic, and a lot of my clients don't even come in as often anymore now, because at least half of our meetings might be on Zoom. And when I look at that across a firm, like, that firm was something like 10 or 11 people. It was like 3 advisors, 8 support staff. If I look at a typical advisory firm today at 1.3 million of revenue, if they've got 3 advisors, they have 2 support staff.
Sure.
And so we've gone from like 8 supporting 3 down to like 2 supporting 3. That's the impact that technology has already had. And I think that just continues to occur. And eventually it starts creating some interesting effects, because as an advisory firm, it means you'll actually have to get pretty large before you actually can even fill a full-time client service administrator's job.
Yes.
Which means I think you're actually going to see more shared services platforms, more broker-dealers, corporate RIAs, and the like that have, outsourced VA, outsourced investment operations desk, not necessarily the full TAMP offering, although you could do that as well, but sort of fractional administrative services, because a lot of us are going to have to grow pretty big to actually need that. And it means our hires, at best, like, you'll hire 1 admin staff, and then your next 2 or 3 hires are all associate advisors, to leverage you up on the advisory side, because you don't need all of this admin staff anymore, because the processes are just increasingly getting technology automated, or at least greatly technology simplified and expedited. And I think tools like AI just help to facilitate that, right? I don't have to dump all of my client notes into my CRM system and then queue up the follow-up tasks to the team and then write the follow-up email to the client. I have an AI meeting notes tool of that sits in my meeting, that captures all that, captures the meeting summary, automatically puts in my CRM system, prompts a couple of tasks that I can just review to make sure they're the right tasks, pre-drafts the follow-up email to client, and I can just sit down and edit it and send it off. Yeah. And so, today, by our own Kitces research data, like the average advisor spends more than an hour of prep and follow-up for every 1 hour that they actually spend in client meetings. And while I don't think that totally vanishes, because there's a layer of, I always still kind of want to make sure the right things are commemorated and what goes out to the clients, the right tasks queue up. But if this goes from 30 minutes of prep and 30 minutes of follow up down to 5 minutes of prep and 5 minutes of follow up,
sure,
then suddenly I'm freeing up really material amounts of time. So either I can go home a little bit earlier and be a little de-stressed, or I can increase my client capacity a little, or I can just interact with my clients more often. Sure. And frankly, I suspect that's most likely how it's going to play out. I think we'll see a future where advisors interact with their clients with greater frequency and smaller bites, which is actually hard right now because the prep follow-up actually is kind of a constraining factor. But when that starts to get AI automated away, that becomes much less of a pain point. And so tools like Jump and Zox and the generics like Fathom that are getting picked up by advisors, start to fill some of those functions.
Yeah, well, that makes a ton of sense. And again, what's happening is the more senior person, the advisors, delivering higher quality value time to that client, because that lower cost work, for lack of a better term, is being done by automation.
Correct. And so, 40 years ago, we just sold a stock. 30 years, I pulled a bunch of Morningstar Principia Pro reports to recommend some mutual funds. Mm-hmm. By 20 years ago, I'm starting to build model portfolios and then begin to implement that with rebalancing software. And maybe I deliver an upfront comprehensive plan. Now, increasingly, firms do ongoing financial plans that are much more continuously monitored and updated because account aggregation makes that easier. Now in the modern world today, we see like adoption of estate document solutions from Encore Estate and Trust and Will and Wealth.com and Vanilla and all of those. We see, by our recent Kitces research data, 10 to 15% of advisory firms now are beginning to insource tax preparation services. It's so hard to find a CPA to refer clients out to. Yes. Just get an EA in the firm. We'll do the returns. Like, we don't need to attest audits and all the rest. We just need to do proper, effective tax returns for clients. And it's pretty easy if we do it in-house.
Are you guys seeing a lot more of that?
So we're seeing a growth in that as well now in our research. Estate documents tends to be outsourced. Tax preparation tends to be insourced for what we're seeing so far. But all that gets down to, well, I can do that because I don't need as many support staff for my advisors because the back office is getting winnowed by the technology. Again, maybe it doesn't necessarily take staffing to zero, but instead of 3 advisors need 8 supports, like 3 advisors need 2 support. Right. I was like, well, cool, you freed up some margin. What else are you going to do with that? Let's hire an EA to do tax returns and extensions. And then the last 3 months of the year after extensions, we'll do individual tax planning pro formas and Roth conversion analyses for every client.
That sounds good. Let me ask you this, your thoughts on AI with regards to compliance. So I was at a panel discussion last week, actually, and that seems like it's made for that. So for example, a very time-consuming part of compliance is checking the emails, checking the social media, checking the ads. That seems like it's made for AI, yeah?
Yeah, a lot of AI has been, I think, very, very overblown about its significance and impact. You talk to it like a chatbot. It sounds like a human. It gives intelligent-sounding answers, and you're like, wow, it's freaking brilliant. Maybe we're all going to be in trouble. But when you really get down to the underlying, it doesn't think. It doesn't have logic. It doesn't know things. It does not know that 1 + 1 = 2 because of logic. It knows that 1 + 1 = something, and it looks up every document written in the history of mankind to figure out that the most likely thing to follow the sequence of 1 + 1 = is the number 2. But it doesn't know how to do math, which is why you get infamous incidents like the the person that asked the AI how many R's are in the word strawberry, and it couldn't figure it out because it literally doesn't know how to spell nor count. And it turns out no one's ever written a book or an article talking about how many R's are in the word strawberry, so it literally couldn't figure out the answer to the question because it has no knowledge and logic. So when I hear things like it's going to displace advisors and give advice, I'm like, it literally doesn't know anything. It's a word pattern recognition system that was fed the knowledge of mankind to figure out word sequences. But there are certain parts of that becomes really relevant. So anytime we've got a whole bunch of language and we need to analyze it, understand it, and synthesize it, it's pretty good. So we had a 30-minute meeting, summarize the meeting notes and find action items. It's pretty good at it. Here's all of our correspondence. Look through it and find anything that looks like a compliant complaint, an allegation of fraud, or something that sounds like a guarantee being promised to clients.
Yeah.
I think it's an amazing use case for AI. I don't know that we're going to buy like standalone AI analytical tools for compliance. I think realistically, like the compliance platforms that already do the surveillance will offer AI features that just kind of build this in as a capability of the software.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's pretty cool from the chief compliance officer's end. It's less time consuming for the AI to just scan all the emails and tell me the ones that look questionable. I'm probably still going to look at them. I'm not going to trust the AI. The AI is not going to say you're fired because we evaluated your emails and it's questionable.
Right.
But it can float up to a chief compliance officer to do a manual review, which is much better than chief compliance officer doing random spot checks of X% of emails trying to find anything that's questionable because they couldn't possibly read everything, and then hoping that the spot checks yield the actual incidents. Right? For anyone who's been an advisor or like an advisory firm owner, there is that deep down freaking terrifying thing of, what if one of my employees literally actually did try to commit fraud?
Mm-hmm.
Like, truly was trying to steal and skim money off of client accounts. Would I actually catch it? Probably not when I'm doing spot checks of emails for some percentage. Just, it's hard to find it. Well, when the AI literally reads everything that's ever printed, published, put out, like suddenly it can find things. Like it's actually better as a surveilling tool, which I view, yes, there's like a creepy 1984 version of that, but there's also just this is literally better consumer protection.
Sure. No,
and reduces my risk that someone actually does a bad fraudulent thing on my watch in my firm. So I think a lot of firms actually are going to be kind of excited to embrace this, and just helping chief compliance officers focus on the things that matter instead of doing random spot checks for the sake of proving that there is some semblance of oversight, even though the odds that the random spot check catches the actual problematic email is very, very low. Right. To me, is just a great improvement in ensuring like we really are doing the right thing to keep clients protected. We have their life savings. Like, this stuff really matters. So I'm thrilled to see AI coming in there. But relative to the original comment, like it fits. It compliance of all of our correspondence, advertising, and the like is a giant, large language list of interactions. So what a great thing for a large language model to apply itself to try to spot questionable concerning trends.
Do you ever think it would evolve, and as you're saying this, I'm thinking, where firms and multiple firms would collect the language models together in some sort of redacted way to get better AI for looking at the compliance component?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I think it's an interesting question just from the AI nerds perspective. Say, look, so the easiest way to catch fraud is when someone says, I'll wire you the money to account number that no one has ever seen before. It's like, well, that's questionable.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, granted, some fraudsters get sloppy at some point, but most of them, if you're doing something in a channel that in any way, shape, or form could be surveilled, you don't use quote, dumb words we're so going to steal this client's money and make the fraudulent transfer here. You figure out pretty quickly the words not to use because you know that compliance does scans for problem words.
Yeah.
So to me, it's a really interesting AI exercise. What would you train an AI bot on to catch questionable, fraudulent language and behavior for people that don't use the problem words?
Right.
Could you train it enough to do it? And I'll bet you can. I don't know if you'll find everything. People can be pretty creative about code words and such.
Sure.
But But I think there's really interesting opportunities there. I don't know if it's necessarily like firms share it, or you just create a great compliance tool and train it on third-party external materials to say like here's how you catch certain fraudulent behavior patterns. But
Right.
I think there's real opportunities there to like just to catch like the truly bad actors in our space that just bring everyone down.
Okay, so it looks like technology, yet again, is not going to put us out of a job, but make our jobs different and perhaps better. What else are you seeing in the future for our industry?
Broadly, when I look at this, the other challenge that's come from like the particular way that the technology has evolved, we stopped selling stocks, we stopped selling mutual funds. We've kind of now started to move away from quote just selling asset allocated diversified portfolios. Like, okay, I can buy one of those online from a robo. What else do you do for me? So we're increasingly going into the financial planning, wealth management end, which I think is great. Better value proposition for clients, more value that we bring to the table. But I'm a comprehensive financial planner that does everything for everyone is actually really hard to differentiate on. And I think we're seeing this writ large in the advisory space that just organic growth rates of almost everyone in the aggregate keep descending to like low to mid single digits, which is not the strongest growth rate. Some of that is because we're basically running out of unattached clients. I mean, if you're actually willing to delegate your life savings to an advisor and you have not already found one, I don't know what rock you were living under. Right. Like just anyone who is out there has been gobbled up. At best, you get people as they hit their liquidity events. I sell my business, I exercise my options, I roll over my 401k plan. Yeah. But there's only so many of those coming into the marketplace at once. And so to me, what it's leading to in the aggregate is both, there is some pressure on the AUM model, not there's anything wrong with AUM for delegators, but there's only so many delegators with a pile of money that has not already been rolled to someone. Ooh. And so either you have to become much more effective at differentiating from all the other advisors crowding the same assets under management model for affluent delegators, or you have to start looking to new and different business models. I'm going to do a subscription fee for young doctors who make a couple $100,000 a year and have 6 figures of student loan debt. So they're not going to be making an investment account for a long time. They got to pay down the student loan debt, and they want to get married and start a family and buy a house and then eventually move out, start their own medical practice and all this other stuff going on. I was like, I'm not going to be an AUM client for you for a long time. But I have a lot of complexity and financial complexity in my life. I would be happy to pay you a fee today that might be several $1,000s a year, which is as good as an advisory firm with a $250,000 minimum.
Right.
But it's literally not attached to assets under management, and it opens up these whole new blue oceans of clients that don't get served right now.
Sure.
So I do think there's this byproduct that the technology made it easier for consumers to get the products directly. So we moved out of the product business into the advice business. And the advice business is a great place to be, but we can only so many of us can do the same advice business with the same AUM model for the same affluent delegators. And so now the pressure is becoming, how do you differentiate to attract them over everybody else that's trying to attract them? Or are you going to look at alternative business models to go after different segments of the marketplace where other advisors are not?
Right. That makes a ton of sense. So you're talking about the Henrys, of course, right? High income earners, not rich yet, I think, yeah?
Yes, although I kind of bristle a little at the Henry label because the whole aspect of the Henry part, the not rich yet, is like, so basically that's a label for crappy client but might be wealthy someday, let's take a flyer on them.
Okay.
I mean, like that's how advisory firms show up. I'm gonna knowingly serve them at a loss because I'm hoping even though they're not rich yet, they'll be rich soon enough that this will turn out to be profitable for me. And to me, that's different than saying like, no, I'm going after like high earner wants advice now.
Okay.
You're like, what does it look like to go after clients who will pay twice your minimum AUM fee as long as you promise not to manage their investments?
Right. Okay.
Because I just want to pay you $400 a month, $5,000 a year because I need student loan advice, cash flow, spending, budgeting, merging households, starting family, education fund, start a business fund, house fund, and I'm trying to do all these things at the same time.
Right.
In the industry, like say, well, you're a 30-something, you don't have a lot of money, you must be a pretty simple situation. I'm like, do you not remember when you were in your 30s? Like, have you talked to anyone who's in their 30s today? I don't know a single 30-year-old who describes their financial life as simple. Like, that's not the word that comes out.
Sure.
They just don't have investment issues. They have financial advice issues,
right.
But they're often not investment portfolio issues. And so Henry to me is still a label for an AUM client who just doesn't have the assets to meet my AUM minimums yet.
Fair enough.
And to me, the opportunity is no. Actually go up for people with financial complexity and a willingness to write a sizable multi-$1,000 check for advice and just give them freaking awesome advice.
Yeah.
that's so worth the fee, and you might even be able to charge higher fees that are more remunerative to you than your current asset minimums, and certainly better than taking them as an accommodation client for almost no money because you're hoping they turn out to be rich later.
Sure. Well, that makes a ton of sense because a lot of these younger people in their 30s, it is complex, especially you're just married, you just have kids. There's so many things you have to think about.
There's a lot.
From an estate planning perspective and a college planning, everything.
And then you hit your 40s. It's like, well, now my career is really humming along. I'm making more money, but I'm kind of burning out of my career. I'm thinking about pausing, going back to school. In the meantime, we're going to rely on my wife's income while my kids go to college in 4 years, and my parents need some help now.
Right.
I'm like, okay, well, it didn't get any simpler as I get into my 40s as well. There's financial complexities that come through much of our life that are very conducive to getting advice. But I think the industry has so viewed this through an assets-based lens that we basically only have two types or like three types of clients: people who have enough assets for us, people who don't have enough assets for us yet, and people who will never have assets for us. And so we serve the first one, we accommodate the second one, and we just eschew the third one. But a lot of these people would literally willing to write checks. And one of the fascinating things to me that's come forth over the past 10 years in particular, if you go back to when the robos were starting, the robos came forth. Everyone said, like, affluent people want to have someone to work with. You're just going to have to work with young people who are techies. And so the robos said, fine, we'll be the thing for millennials. And then we kind of got this label of, well, millennials are just going to be the robo-advisor generation. They're never going to hire advisors and we'll want to pay for them. And when you actually look now at what data is showing up in the consumer studies, it turns out the generation most willing to pay for financial advice is millennials.
Really?
They're most willing to pay for financial advice. Baby boomers don't want to pay for financial advice because they didn't pay for it for 30 years in the financial services system because they got totally used to the fact that everything's kind of bundled into my company pays me so you don't have to, and the whole thing that our industry did. So they're completely unaccustomed to paying for financial advice and then often get sticker shock. If you talk to a young person, like, I pay my accountant to do my taxes. If I ever have a legal problem, I pay my lawyer. If I need financial advice, when I have a health problem, I pay my doctor. If I need financial advice, like, I'm just assuming I'm going to have to pay a check to my financial advisor. Why would you possibly think it was going to be anything else?
Right.
So it turns out the younger generations are the most willing to pay financial advice fees.
Interesting.
Which is driving a lot of growth in, I think that's broadly why you see so much activity now in these alternative fee models, right? Subscriptions, retainers, net worth and income fees. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to compile it depending on the particular segment of clientele that you're going after, but all built around this recognition that we don't have to view clients through an assets-only lens. It turns out a lot of people have a lot of financial complexity and a financial wherewithal to pay enough in fees that we can run viable businesses. I mean, there is some threshold. It's hard to scale an advisory firm at a couple $100s per client. It works better when you can get to a couple $1,000s per client. That's why a lot of us eventually put in $100,000 or $250,000 or $500,000 minimums. But there are a lot of households that can pay that in outright advice fees, but they need different stuff. Like, it's not portfolio based. And that's not to knock the AUM model for working with people with affluence who want someone to delegate it to. I think that model is actually way more robust than anyone gives it credit to be. But to me, like, AUM is essentially a niche model for affluent delegators.
Yep.
And so, great if that's your niche and you want to do that. Like, it works great. It's very well aligned for them. They're not complaining about it. They're quite happy to do it. But it's very limiting because there's only so many households in the U.S. that actually fit that profile, and there are actually a lot more that fit other profiles.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And if we could have you for just a couple more minutes.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the future of wealth advice, I think we have to talk about the wealth transfer, the great wealth transfer, $60-70 trillion. What advice are you giving to advisors to prepare for that?
So candidly, I have a little bit of a controversial take on this, which is I think this whole idea of like pursuing wealth down the family tree is just utterly absurd and preposterous, and will be a complete failure for virtually every advisory.
You've heard it here first on goRIA. What do you mean by that?
So let me take it out of the advisor world for a moment. Let's say for a moment you run a nursing home, like a high-end nursing home in a pretty affluent area. You're in one of these places. This is the like $15,000-$20,000 a month nursing home kind of place. So, good business. You're actually one of the nursing homes that makes money and is profitable. It's going really well, except you have one fundamental problem. Your customers die on a regular basis.
Yes.
So how do you handle this as a nursing home owner? So like, I know all my clients are literally multimillionaires. That's the only way you're affording my $20,000 a month nursing home fee. So option one, I know that Pop Pop has several $1 million. So I'm going to start doing game nights for Pop Pop's grandchildren to have them come in. We're going to put iPads in all the rooms. We're going to put Xboxes in the lounges. And we're going to try to make this an awesome place for millennials so that when Pop Pop dies and the grandkids inherit the money, they'll move into Pop Pop's room and they'll use their multi-million dollars to pay $20,000 a month to live in the nursing home. You run a freaking nursing home and they're millennials. In what world do you possibly think a young millennial is going to want to move into Pop Pop's nursing home? Like, you run a nursing home. If your biggest problem is that your patients die on a regular basis, go find more old people who have money who need a nursing home. We're not running out of them. I wouldn't figure out how to find millennials inheritors of Pop Pop's money. I would build a relationship with the local discharge nurse at the hospital and say, if you've got people who are sick and need to be discharged and can't go home anymore, and it looks like they want a little bit more of an upscale facility, give them my business card and we'll talk to them and help them out. So I go to where my clients are because I'm literally the leading high-end nursing home in the area. I don't chase the money down the family tree, because at that point what I'm basically saying is my clients is not actually the person in my room. My clients is the pot of money, and I just want to serve the pot of money, whoever happens to be holding the pot of money at the time. And A, that's not a terribly good business model, and B, the person holding the pot of money figures that out really quickly, that that's what you're there for. And so I think a lot of advisory firms, frankly, grossly underestimate how specialized they are in retirement. And that's great. Go get more retirees. We're not running out of them. We're still turning 10,000 a day plus that are eligible for Social Security. There's plenty of folks out there that need that help and want that help and will pay for that help. And if that's your brand and your excellence, what you're known for, keep being awesome at that. But pretending that you can convince millennials as a retirement specialist that you're actually hip, it's like a hey there fellow kids moment kind of thing that, like, it's just not viable. So there's some aspect of this. I mean, if you're truly in the family wealth, 9-figure net worth, there is a families that actually have generational wealth where you want to work down the family tree, like multifamily office style environments. I mean, that's different. There's like an actual multi-generational value proposition there. But for most advisory firms, like, you specialize in retirees, the idea that the millennial clients are going to think you're hip is, I think, grossly unrealistic. It's a disservice to your actual clients, because now you lose your focus on being an awesome retirement home, because instead of being an awesome retirement nursing home, you're being an awesome retirement nursing home that's trying to also be hip to millennials, which is probably not going to fool the millennials and will actually piss off the nursing home residents, because now they're like, why did you buy Xboxes? We don't play Xbox. We're 84 years old. So you start misallocating your resources while not being appealing to the people that you were trying to serve, while not nurturing the marketing channels that would actually bring you the business of the core segment that you're already in. It just makes the business worse from almost every possible angle.
This is the first I've ever heard that vantage point. That's interesting. So let me push back just a little bit, if I may.
Sure.
So if you have the nursing home, Pop Pop needs it, but the millennial doesn't, because the millennial doesn't need a nursing home.
Correct.
But I would say it stands to reason, and frankly, I kind of think this way. If Pop Pop needs money managed and financial planning, if you're a financial planner, right, not just a retirement income specialist and certainly not just a portfolio manager, but if you're truly a financial planner, doesn't that millennial need financial planning? And if we have the ability to do financial planning, regardless of the age, because I think financial planning, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, comes down to the cash flow analysis. That's a big part of it, at least. How much is coming in, what's going out, the rate of return. Can't that apply to a millennial as well?
Not really.
Really?
Their needs are more different than you realize. Like, you spend all that time becoming an expert in Social Security. It's like, cool. Do you know the difference between pay and repay in the student loan program? Can you cite that off the top of your head and do the math instantaneously the way that any expert in that space can?
Okay,
it's like,
fair enough.
No. Like, cool, because that's a core competency for serving that segment that you don't have. And there's a whole bunch there. To me, it's kind of like saying, I know I'm a brain surgeon, but I went to medical school, so even though you've got a heart problem, I should be able to do heart surgery, right? I mean, I know how the blood vessels worked. I learned in medical school. I know medicine things, and yes, You might even be a decent diagnostician of certain heart issues because you went to medical school and you're pretty knowledgeable. But if you're a brain surgeon and you try to do open heart surgery on me, like, you're going to get sued out of oblivion.
Sure.
This isn't going to go well for you. Like, it's really not your specialty. And the fact that you've got a common denominator of having gone to med school only carries you so far. So yes, I'm still more knowledgeable about the heart than like 99.9% of people off the street, but it doesn't mean I'm actually qualified to do heart surgery.
Fair enough. Okay.
And so I think of it in the same vein that, you know, the complexities of what goes on for people in different ages and different stages of life. At best, you don't have the knowledge. At worst, you try to get the knowledge, which means you're now learning new things for every single client that you work with, which makes you horrifically inefficient, which means you're still going to end up losing. It's like, cool, you got a millennial who's a doctor, and then you got another millennial who works for Intel, and you got another millennial who's a business owner. Okay, you can read up on the books and the technical stuff and the rest and learn all three, but the advisor who specializes in Intel employees can do it better, faster, and cheaper than you can. The advisor who specializes in young doctors at the local hospital that already knows all the employee benefits and the hospital contracts off the back of their hand can negotiate that client's employment contracts better than you can. And the advisor who specializes in small business owners already has an entire spreadsheet system about how they do diagnostics on small businesses that they can drop in and do the analysis in 10 minutes, and you're going to spend 4 hours going through their P&L and probably not do as good of a job. So, okay, you can go serve other clients because I'm smart enough to figure things out, like we are, but that's actually a very inefficient advice model. You can do it and get paid for it, but it means, like, cool, the advisor who specializes in this space can charge the client $4,000, and you're going to have to charge them $10,000 because that's how much longer it's going to take you to serve the client that you don't know them. Oh, and by the way, Pop had $3 million. But he left $500 to his favorite charity, and then he spread the rest of it across 5 grandchildren.
Right.
So you've now gone from one $3 million client to 5 $500,000 clients.
I have thought of that.
Who require 5 times the work, except it's more than 5 times the work because they're not actually in your core competencies.
Right.
So you're going to 10 times the work for the same one client household, which isn't even accretive to the business. Like, you would have been better to spend 10x the time to get one more client that was actually a retiree that had some affluence, than trying to learn how to serve 5 grandchildren that you don't really know how to serve, that you have to learn how to serve inefficiently for a fraction of the fee per household that you were getting anyways. Like, it just starts to break down very, very quickly.
It's honestly really interesting. I've never thought of it that way. I've been asking a lot of people this question. It's the first time I've gotten that response. And as you explained it that way, it makes some sense, a lot of sense actually. Do you think we'll see firms that have the wherewithal, that have the scale, to start bringing in advisors to deal specifically with that next-gen client?
But potentially. So, I mean, if not to overstretch the analogy, like, look, trying to get the millennials to move into the nursing home is pretty much a non-starter, and if you actually try to start, it's going to go very poorly. If you really want to be a real estate developer, you could buy land across the street, make Millennial Village that's actually built for millennials and their needs and their interests and their desires. And if you put it across the street from the retirement home so that the millennials get to live near their grandparents, that might actually be cool. Like, the family wants to be together, and the great-grandchildren can see their grandparents. Like, there's some really cool stuff that happens from that. Could I sell a residential community with nursing homes and millennials all in one place so that the family can all be in immediate proximity to each other? It's probably a segment of people I could do that. I think that would work.
Sure.
But that means I have to not only continue to successfully build and scale my nursing home business for affluent retirees, I'm literally making an entirely new second business from scratch in an area that I have no knowledge and core competencies aside from the fact that I went to financial planning school. And I'm going to build this from scratch and try to figure out how to perfect the model enough to be compelling in the marketplace against all the other advisors whose sole goal is to work with millennials and are uniquely and totally focused on them, and that's your competition in that space. So could you do it? Yes. Would you need a lot of scale? Like, probably, if you're really going to see that as like a second business line. But then if I'm sitting on that person's board of directors, I'm still be coming back and saying, like, so show me again what the P&L projection is to build a whole second business into a segment that's not even really your core clientele, when you could just reinvest in the one that's already very profitable, that you're really good at, that you're already known for, have a great brand for, and could just amplify your current referral channels on.
Yeah. Well, just tell them you're going to build a graveyard as well. So you have the whole thing.
Well, you could get pretty cradle to grave if you really want to keep going down that going down that path. So yes, I mean there's a point with mega businesses where you actually start building the adjacencies. You either right you do horizontal integrations or you do more vertical integrations. Like yes, but again, like the biggest advisory firms are still basically microcap businesses in like the grand scheme of of business overall. So like, okay, maybe there's literally like a small single-digit percentage of firms out there that are like truly big enough and scaled enough that they could do that and seed that and run it in parallel. Most advisory firms, I find at the end of the day, like it's really just ultimately a distraction for them instead of going after the main thing, right? Unfortunately, the challenge for particularly the independent advisor marketplace, like we do tend to be visionary folks. That's why we're willing to hang our own shingle and build our own cabin with logs by hands and all that stuff. It means we also get a little bit prone sometimes to shiny object syndrome and like doing more. It's more exciting to do new things than to just be twice as good and awesome and big at the thing we're already good and awesome and big at.
I suffer from that a little bit, to be honest.
So like I get it. I'm a visionary entrepreneur as well. I struggle with this as well. But to me, then what we get down to is a lot of folks that get stuck on shiny object syndrome instead of saying, but the best thing you can really do for your business is just continue to be awesome at the thing you're awesome at and expand your marketing capabilities right there because you're already good and awesome at it and it's profitable.
All right. Tell you what, that sounds like a good place to put a pin in it for today.
Awesome.
Michael Kitces, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chuck.
It's always a pleasure having you, and I love the context of how Schwab started, and then going into that very controversial, I would say controversial, certainly non-customary view on going after next gen. So thank you for that as well.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that's it for this particular segment. We have one more coming up in about an hour and a half. So on behalf of goRIA, fueled by Investment News, I'm Chuck Vela with Michael Kitces, and I'll see you in about another hour. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.